The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the Montana territory, turning the red earth into fine dust that swirled with every breath of wind. Caleb Turner stood on the porch of his weathered cabin, squinting against the harsh light that stretched endlessly across the barren landscape. Sagebrush dotted the horizon, their silvery leaves the only hint of life in this unforgiving land. He had built this place with his own hands, every board and nail a testament to the life he'd planned with Margaret. But that was 3 winters ago, before the blizzard that took her and their unborn child. Now the cabin stood as a monument to solitude, its walls echoing with silence that pressed against his ears like cotton. Caleb wiped the sweat from his brow with a calloused hand, his flannel shirt already soaked through despite the early hour. At 32, he moved with the measured pace of a man who'd learned that rushing brought nothing but trouble in this harsh country. His weathered face bore the marks of sun and wind, and his gray eyes held a distance that kept most folks from asking too many questions. The creak of wagon wheels interrupted his morning ritual of checking the horizon for signs of rain that never came. Old Duffy's mule-drawn cart kicked up a cloud of dust as it approached. The grizzled man perched on the seat like a weathered scarecrow. "Morning, Caleb," Duffy called out, his voice rough as sandpaper. "Got something for you." Caleb descended the steps slowly, his boots hitting the packed earth with dull thuds. Duffy was grinning, which immediately put him on edge. The old man only smiled like that when he was up to something. "If it's another one of your schemes to get me to town for the harvest dance." "Better than that," Duffy interrupted, producing a crumpled envelope from his vest pocket. "Letter came for you, from back east." Caleb's brow furrowed. He had no family back east, no business that would warrant correspondence. He took the letter, noting the feminine handwriting on the envelope. His name was spelled out in careful script: Mr. Caleb Turner, Turner Ranch, Montana Territory. "What's this about, Duffy?" The old man's grin widened, showing gaps where teeth used to be. "Well now, that's the interesting part. You remember a few months back when I was laid up with that broken leg? You brought me supplies, checked on my stock. What's that got to do with—" "I figured it was time you had some help around here. Someone to cook proper meals, keep the place tidy, maybe give you a reason to smile once in a while." The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. His jaw tightened as understanding dawned. "You didn't." "I did. Sent a letter to one of them matrimonial agencies. Said you were a prosperous rancher looking for a bride. Even sent along that photograph from last year's cattle sale. You clean up nice when you try." Caleb's hands clenched into fists, the letter crumpling slightly. "I told you I wasn't looking to marry again. I made that clear. You're wasting away out here, boy. Margaret wouldn't want—" "Don't!" The word came out sharp as a rifle crack. "Don't speak her name." Duffy's expression softened. "Someone's got to look after you, since you won't do it yourself. That letter says she's already on her way. Should be arriving on today's afternoon train." Meanwhile, 1,500 miles away in a cramped boarding house in Baltimore, Lily Jameson had made her decision weeks ago. She sat on the edge of a narrow bed, her few possessions packed into a worn carpet bag. Her reflection in the cracked mirror showed a young woman of 24, with dark hair pulled back severely and green eyes that held shadows deeper than her years should warrant. She touched her cheek gingerly, where the bruise had finally faded to a sickly yellow, her father's last gift before she'd fled in the night. The letter from the matrimonial agency had been a miracle, arriving just days after Richard Hartwell had paid her father for her hand. Richard, with his cold eyes and cruel hands that left marks where they wouldn't show. The journey west had been a blur of swaying train cars and endless prairie. At every stop, she'd feared seeing her father's face or Richard's hired men. In Kansas City, a drunk had cornered her in the depot, his whiskey breath hot on her face as he pawed at her traveling cloak. An elderly woman named Mrs. Morrison had intervened, striking the man with her walking stick and staying with Lily until the next train arrived. "You're running from something, Mrs." Morrison had said, not a question but a statement. "Well, the frontier's a good place for new beginnings. Just remember, child, you can't outrun yourself. Now, as the train wheezed to a stop at the tiny Montana station, Lily adjusted the thick veil that covered her face. She'd bought it in Omaha, claiming she was in mourning. It wasn't entirely a lie. She was mourning the life she'd never had, the choices that were never hers to make. The platform was nearly deserted. Just a few cowhands loading crates and a woman herding 3 small children. The heat hit her like a wall after the relative cool of the train car. Her traveling dress, appropriate for Baltimore society, felt suffocating in this dry air. She stood uncertainly, carpetbag in hand, searching for someone who might be Caleb Turner. The letter had included no photograph, only a brief description. A man of good character and established means, seeking a helpmate for his ranch. A tall figure leaned against a wagon at the edge of the platform, arms crossed, hat pulled low against the sun. Even from a distance, she could see the rigid set of his shoulders, the unwelcoming stance. This had to be him. Lily walked toward him, her boots clicking on the wooden planks. As she drew closer, she could make out weathered features, a strong jaw set in displeasure. He didn't move to meet her halfway, didn't tip his hat or offer any greeting. Mr. Turner. Her voice came out smaller than intended, muffled by the veil. Ma'am. The word was clipped, cold. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't send for a bride. My friend took it upon himself to interfere where he wasn't wanted. Lily's heart sank. She'd spent her last dollar on the train ticket, had nowhere to go back to even if she wanted, which she didn't. I see. The letter said, the letter was sent without my knowledge or consent. He straightened, and she realized just how tall he was, how broad his shoulders. I'll pay for your return ticket. There's a boarding house in town where you can stay until the next eastbound train. Desperation clawed at her throat. She couldn't go back. Death would be preferable to what awaited her in Baltimore. Her hand trembled as she reached up to adjust her veil, and the movement caused her sleeve to pull back, revealing the dark bruises that ringed her wrist like a bracelet. Caleb's eyes tracked the movement, saw the marks. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but Lily caught it, a flicker of recognition, of understanding. The afternoon sun slanted across the platform, and a gust of wind lifted the edge of her veil. She quickly pressed it back down, but not before he glimpsed the fading bruise along her jaw. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, Caleb cleared his throat. The ranch is a hard day's ride from here. It's isolated. No proper women's society, no church closer than town. It's no place for... He paused, seemingly searching for words. It's no place for someone used to civilization. I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Turner. Lily lifted her chin, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. I'm not afraid of hard work or isolation. He studied her for a long moment, and she had the unsettling feeling he could see through the veil, through the carefully constructed walls she'd built around herself. Something in his expression softened, though his stance remained guarded. The ranch house has a separate room. You'd have privacy. I wouldn't. He stopped, ran a hand through his dark hair. I'm not looking for a wife, ma'am, but if you need a place to stay while you figure out your next move, I suppose I could use help with cooking and such. Fair wages, nothing more. Relief flooded through her so suddenly her knees nearly buckled. Thank you. Thank you. He moved to take her carpetbag, careful not to touch her hand in the exchange. Name's Caleb. Just Caleb. And you, Lily. Lily Jameson. He nodded once, then turned toward the wagon. Best get moving. We need to reach the ranch before dark. As she climbed onto the wagon seat, maintaining careful distance between them, Lily caught a glimpse of his profile. There was something in the set of his jaw, the way he held himself apart, that spoke of a grief as deep as her own fears. Perhaps this harsh, unforgiving land might offer them both a chance at something neither dared name: peace. The ranch house squatted low against the landscape like it was trying to burrow into the earth for protection. As the wagon rolled to a stop, Lily took in the weathered wood siding, the sagging porch, and the way sand had piled in small drifts against the foundation. It was nothing like the brick row houses of Baltimore, but something about its stubborn endurance spoke to her. "Well," Caleb said, climbing down from the wagon, "this is it." He didn't offer to help her down, and she was grateful for that. Too many men had grabbed at her under the pretense of courtesy. She managed the descent on her own, her traveling dress catching on the rough wagon boards. Inside, the house was sparse but clean. A main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a cast-iron stove that radiated heat even though the fire had burned low. A rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a shelf with a few dishes, and a rocking chair by the window comprised the furnishings. Everything spoke of utility, nothing of comfort. "Your room," Caleb said, gesturing to a door off the main area. "Was meant to be—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "It's yours now. There's a bolt on the inside." The mention of the bolt made her shoulders relax slightly. He'd noticed her need for security, acknowledged it without question. She peered into the small room, a narrow bed with a quilt that had seen better days, a washstand, and a single chair. It was more privacy than she'd had in months. "Thank you," she said quietly. "About wages. Room and board, plus $2 a week. Water comes from the well out back, pumps temperamental. You have to prime it just right. Outhouse is behind the barn." He moved to the stove, checking the fire. "I'm usually out before dawn, back by sunset. You'll find supplies in the pantry." Lily set her carpet bag on the bed, finally removing the heavy veil. The relief of cool air on her face was immediate. When she returned to the main room, Caleb was measuring coffee grounds, his movements efficient and practiced. "I can do that," she offered. He glanced at her, and she saw his eyes track the fading bruise on her jaw before he looked away. "Tomorrow, you should rest." But rest didn't come easily. That night, Lily lay rigid in the narrow bed, listening to every creak of the house, every whisper of wind. Several times she rose to check the bolt on her door, her heart racing at imagined footsteps. When she finally dozed, she dreamed of Richard's hands around her throat, of her father counting money while she screamed. She woke to gray pre-dawn light and the sound of movement in the main room. Caleb was already up, stoking the fire. She dressed quickly, pinning her hair back severely, and emerged to find him pulling on his boots. "I'll make breakfast," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. He nodded, grabbed his hat, and was gone. Lily examined the pantry, finding sacks of flour and cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, and precious few vegetables. She managed to produce biscuits that were only slightly burned and coffee strong enough to float horseshoes. When Caleb returned at midday to water the horses, he ate without comment. Though she caught him examining the biscuits with something like surprise, days fell into a rhythm. She learned the moods of the temperamental pump, discovered which boards in the floor creaked, and found that the wind never really stopped. It whistled through gaps in the walls, carried grit that settled on every surface no matter how often she cleaned. Her hands, already rough from work, cracked and bled in the dry air. She took to mending in the evenings, working by lamplight while Caleb sat at the table, going over accounts or repairing tack. They rarely spoke, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the quiet of two people who understood that words could be weapons, that sometimes the kindest thing was to say nothing at all. One afternoon, she was struggling to haul water from the well when the bucket rope slipped from her raw hands. She cried out as it burned across her palms, then froze as Caleb appeared beside her. She hadn't heard him approach. "Let me see," he said, his voice gentler than usual. She hesitated, then held out her hands. He examined the rope burns without touching her, then disappeared into the house. He returned with a tin of salve and clean strips of cloth. "Hold still," he said, and carefully applied the salve. His hands were large and work-hardened, but his touch was careful, clinical. When he wrapped the cloth around her palms, she noticed scars on his own hands, old burns, healed cuts, the map of a hard life. "Thank you," she whispered. He stepped back immediately, as if suddenly aware of their proximity. "Should have shown you how to wrap the rope. My fault." That evening, she found leather work gloves on her chair, worn but serviceable. The first time she flinched from thunder. Caleb was checking the barn door latch. The storm had blown in suddenly, turning day to twilight. Lightning split the sky, and the following thunder made her drop the plate she was washing. It shattered on the floor. "I'm sorry," she gasped, dropping to her knees to gather the pieces. "I'll pay for it. Stop!" His voice was firm, but not harsh. "It's just a plate." She looked up to find him standing carefully away from her, hands visible and open. He'd understood that her fear wasn't really about the storm. "Wyoming storms are loud," he said conversationally, moving to stoke the fire. "Takes getting used to. Margaret used to say they sounded like God moving furniture." It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife. Lily rose slowly, disposed of the broken plate, and went back to washing dishes. Behind her, she heard him settle into his chair, the familiar creak of leather as he worked on a bridle. The storm raged outside, but inside, the quiet routine continued. One night, the dream was worse than usual. Richard's face morphed into her father's, their hands reaching for her, voices telling her she was worthless, that she belonged to them, that she could never escape. She woke screaming, tangled in the quilt, sweat soaking her nightgown. The door. She'd forgotten to bolt the door. Panic seized her as footsteps approached. She scrambled back against the wall, pulling the quilt up like a shield. "Miss Lily?" Caleb's voice came from the other side of the door, careful and calm. "You're safe. You're at the ranch. No one can hurt you here." Reality slowly seeped back. The ranch, Montana, far from Baltimore and everything she'd fled. Her breathing gradually slowed. "I'm sorry," she called out, voice shaking. "I didn't mean to wake you." "Nothing to be sorry for." A pause. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything." She heard his footsteps retreat. Then the scrape of a chair. He was staying up, keeping watch. The knowledge loosened something in her chest. She crept to the door, slid the bolt home, then returned to bed. Through the thin walls, she could hear him moving about, the clink of a cup, the creak of his chair, standing guard without intrusion. In the morning, neither mentioned the incident, but Caleb left a cup of coffee on the table for her before heading out, still steaming. That evening, she found wildflowers in a tin cup on the windowsill, Indian paintbrush and prairie roses, their bright colors shocking against the drab walls. She was examining them when he came in for supper. "They're beautiful," she said softly. He hung his hat on the peg, not meeting her eyes. Thought they might brighten the place up some. That night after supper, as she darned socks and he worked leather, she found herself speaking. "The thunder, it sounds like doors slamming. That's why He looked up from his work, waiting. "My father, he would slam doors when he was angry, which was often." The words came haltingly. "And then Richard, the man he sold me to, he would—" Her voice failed. Caleb set down his work, his full attention on her, though he kept his distance. "You don't have to tell me," he said quietly. "But if talking helps, I'll listen." She managed a tremulous smile. "Maybe someday, it's enough that you don't ask questions. Everyone's running from something out here," he said, returning to his work. "That's what the frontier's for, second chances." The days grew hotter, the sun baking the earth until it cracked like old leather. Lily learned to move slowly during the heat of the day, to wear a hat when venturing outside. She discovered that Caleb left earlier and earlier to beat the worst of the heat, returning dust-covered and exhausted. One evening, she noticed him favoring his left shoulder as he came in. He'd been breaking a new horse, though he hadn't mentioned any trouble. She heated water without asking, added salts she found in the pantry, and set the basin on the table with clean cloths. He looked at the steaming water, then at her. Something passed across his face, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "Shoulders just stiff," he said. "The hot water will help," she replied. turning to give him privacy. She heard the splash of water, a quiet sigh of relief. When she turned back, he was rolling his shoulder experimentally. "Better," he admitted. "Thank you." It was such a small thing, but she saw how he looked at her differently after that, not with suspicion or pity, but with a kind of cautious respect, as if she'd proven something, though she wasn't sure what. That night, she smiled for the first time in months. It was brief, barely a flicker, and she quickly suppressed it. But Caleb saw, and though he said nothing, she caught him almost smiling too as he bent over his ledgers. The frontier was harsh, unforgiving, lonely, but here in this small house, with its creaking floors and drafty walls, something fragile and unnamed was taking root. Not love, both were too wounded for that, but understanding, and for now, that was enough. The town of Cedar Ridge sprawled along the railroad tracks like a dust-covered afterthought. Once a month. Caleb hitched up the wagon for supplies, and this time, Lily needed fabric for clothing better suited to ranch life. Her Baltimore dresses were wearing thin, impractical for the endless work. Main Street consisted of a general store, a saloon, a small hotel that doubled as a restaurant, and various other establishments that served the scattered ranches. Lily kept her bonnet low, shadowing her face, as Caleb helped her down from the wagon. "I'll be at Henderson's getting feed," he said. "Meet you back here in an hour?" She nodded, clutching her small purse. He'd insisted on advancing her wages, though she'd worked barely 3 weeks. The coins felt heavy with unearned kindness. The general store smelled of pickle brine and leather, coffee and cotton. Mrs. Garrett, the proprietor's wife, looked Lily up and down with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're Turner's mail-order bride," she announced, loud enough for the other women browsing to hear. "Heard Duffy finally got him hitched." "I'm Mr. Turner's housekeeper," Lily corrected quietly, examining a bolt of sturdy brown calico. "That what they're calling it now?" A younger woman snickered from behind the candy jars. "Living out there alone with him. No chaperone?" Heat crept up Lily's neck. She selected her fabric quickly, added thread and needles to her purchases. As Mrs. Garrett measured and cut, the whispers grew louder. "Shameless, if you ask me. What kind of woman travels alone to marry a stranger? Probably running from something or someone." That last comment, so close to the truth, made Lily's hands tremble as she counted out payment. She gathered her purchases and fled, nearly colliding with a man entering the store. Well," the man's voice was oily with false friendliness. "Caleb's new woman. I'm Frank Morrison. Own the spread next to Turner's place." She tried to step around him, but he moved to block her path. His breath reeked of whiskey despite the early hour. "Unfriendly little thing, aren't you? That's no way to treat neighbors. Maybe I should teach you some manners." The lady said good day. Caleb's voice came from behind Morrison, low and dangerous. The rancher turned, his smile faltering at whatever he saw in Caleb's expression. "Just being neighborly, Turner. Be neighborly somewhere else." Morrison held up his hands in mock surrender and sauntered away, but not before muttering something about trash bringing in more trash. Caleb's jaw worked as he watched the man go. Then he turned to Lily. "You all right?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. He took her packages, his hand briefly touching her elbow to guide her toward the wagon. The gesture was protective without being possessive, and it nearly undid her composure entirely. The ride home was silent for the first few miles. The sun beat down mercilessly, and dust devils danced across the barren landscape. Finally, Caleb spoke. "Morrison's a mean drunk. Stay clear of him if you can." "I didn't mean to cause trouble," Lily said softly. "What they were saying in the store." "Doesn't matter what they say." His hands tightened on the reins. "People here judge quick and harsh. They don't know you." "They called me your mail-order bride. Said I was—" She couldn't finish. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop under the meager shade of a cottonwood. He turned to face her, his gray eyes serious. "Listen to me. You work for me, fair and square. You keep my house and cook my meals better than I've eaten in years. What those biddies in town think doesn't amount to a hill of beans." He paused, looking out over the endless prairie. "I'm sorry they were cruel. That's on me, bringing you to town. You defended me," she said, wonder in her voice. "No one's ever—" She stopped, blinking hard against the sudden sting of tears. Caleb looked uncomfortable with her emotion, but didn't turn away. "Everyone deserves to be treated with respect," he said gruffly. "Now, we best get moving. That cloud bank coming in doesn't look friendly." He was right. The western horizon had turned an ominous yellow-green, and the air had gone still and heavy. They were still 5 miles from the ranch when the wind hit, driving sand and grit with stinging force. "Hold on!" Caleb shouted over the rising howl. "There's a line shack about a mile north. We'll wait it out there." The horses fought the harness, spooked by the advancing wall of dust that turned day to dusk. Lily pulled her shawl over her face, squinting against the assault. Thunder rumbled, though no rain fell. A dry storm, the worst kind. The line shack materialized out of the swirling dust like a mirage. It was tiny, barely 8 feet square, used by cowboys working the far ranges. Caleb fought to unhitch the horses and lead them into the small lean-to shelter attached to the shack. Lily stumbled inside, coughing and shaking dust from her clothes. The shack held a narrow bunk, a small stove, and a shelf with emergency supplies. One tiny window let in amber light filtered through dust. Caleb entered, slamming the door against the wind's fury. "Could last hours," he said, shaking dust from his hat. "These summer storms are unpredictable." They sat on opposite ends of the bunk, the only furniture besides a 3-legged stool. The wind screamed around the corners of the shack, and grit filtered through every crack. Lily found a can of peaches on the shelf, and they shared them in companionable silence, passing the can back and forth. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped rapidly. Caleb lit the oil lamp and started a small fire in the stove. The circle of light pushed back the darkness but made the space feel even smaller. "Caleb," Lily said suddenly, surprising herself by using his given name. "Why didn't you remarry? After your wife?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was distant. "Margaret was sunshine. That's the only way I can describe her. She laughed at everything. My poor jokes, the ornery milk cow, even that leaky roof I kept meaning to fix." He smiled sadly. When the blizzard came, she insisted on checking the horses, said they sounded distressed. I should have gone instead, but she was stubborn. He fell silent. Lily waited. Found her the next morning, frozen not 50 feet from the house. She'd gotten turned around in the whiteout, the baby, the cold. He couldn't finish. "I'm sorry," Lily whispered, understanding now the emptiness in the house, the way he held himself apart from everything. "After that, I figured I'd had my chance at happiness, more than some men get." He looked at her across the small space. "What about you? That man, Richard, was he your intended?" Lily drew her knees up, making herself smaller. "My father owed him money, gambling debts. Richard offered to clear them in exchange for—" She gestured helplessly. "I was merchandise to them, nothing more." "That why you ran?" She nodded, unable to speak about the rest. The samples Richard had taken of his ownership, the bruises hidden beneath high collars and long sleeves, the promises of worse to come after the wedding. "You were brave to leave," Caleb said quietly. "Takes courage to choose the unknown over the familiar, even when the familiar is bad. Or desperate," she corrected. "Brave would have been leaving sooner?" "No." His voice was firm. "Don't do that. Don't diminish what you survived." They sat in silence as the storm raged. The lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows. Despite the circumstances, Lily felt safer than she had in months. Caleb had moved the 3-legged stool near the stove and sat with his back to the wall, giving her the entire bunk. A gentleman even in rough circumstances. "My mother would have liked you," she said suddenly. "She died when I was 12, but she was strong, like you. "I'm not strong," Caleb said. "I just keep going. There's a difference. Maybe that's what strength is." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in the air between them. Not attraction, they were both too damaged for that, but recognition. Two souls marked by loss, finding unexpected comfort in shared understanding. The wind began to die as quickly as it had risen. Caleb checked outside, returning with dust in his hair but relief on his face. "We can make it home if we leave now. Moon's bright enough to see by." The journey back was surreal, the landscape transformed by the storm. Drifts of sand had accumulated against every vertical surface, and the horses picked their way carefully through the altered terrain. When they finally reached the ranch, Lily was exhausted but oddly exhilarated. She'd survived her first dust storm, her first confrontation with town prejudice, her first real conversation with the man who'd given her shelter. As Caleb tended the horses, she stood on the porch, looking out at the vast darkness punctuated by stars. The mean words from town seemed smaller now, insignificant against the immensity of the sky. "Lily," she turned to find Caleb at the bottom of the steps. "What I said about you being brave, I meant it. And those people in town, they don't know anything about anything." She smiled, a real smile this time that she didn't try to hide. "Thank you, Caleb, for everything today." He nodded, touched the brim of his hat, and disappeared into the barn. Lily went inside, bolted her door from habit more than fear, and lay down fully dressed. Through the window, she could see the light from Caleb's lantern in the barn as he settled the horses. For the first time since arriving in Montana, she didn't check the bolt twice. She didn't lie rigid, listening for footsteps. Instead, she closed her eyes and let the memory of Caleb's voice wash over her. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect. It was such a simple thing, basic human decency. But to someone who'd been traded like a livestock, treated as property, it felt revolutionary. She'd found sanctuary in this unlikely place, with this taciturn man who understood grief and respected boundaries. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more work, more suspicious looks if she ventured to town again. But tonight, she was safe. Tonight, she was seen as a person, not a possession. And for now, that was everything. The change between them was subtle but undeniable. Where once they'd moved around each other like wary animals, now there was an ease, an unspoken understanding. Caleb began leaving small gifts, a smooth river stone for her windowsill, fresh mint from the creek bank for tea, a better lamp for her evening mending. Lily reciprocated in her own ways. She noticed he favored his left knee on damp mornings and began preparing willow bark tea without being asked. When she found him squinting over the account books, she quietly moved the lamp closer. These small kindnesses built a bridge between them, plank by careful plank. One morning, Caleb didn't leave at dawn as usual. Lily found him in the barn, talking softly to the new mare he'd been breaking. "She's skittish around people," he explained when he saw her. "Previous owner was heavy-handed." The mare, a pretty sorrel with a white blaze, pressed against the far wall of the stall, eyes rolling with fear. Lily recognized that look, that bone-deep wariness of human hands. "May I?" she asked softly. Caleb stepped back. Curious. Lily approached slowly, keeping her hands visible, her movements deliberate and calm. She didn't try to touch the mare, just stood at a respectful distance, speaking in low, soothing tones about nothing in particular, the weather, what she planned to cook for supper, how the morning light looked like honey on the barn walls. The mare's ears flicked forward. Listening, after long minutes, she took a tentative step forward, then another, when she finally stretched her neck to sniff Lily's outstretched hand. Caleb let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "How did you know to do that?" he asked. Lily kept her eyes on the mare, stroking the velvet nose with gentle fingers. "Sometimes the frightened ones just need to know you won't hurt them, that you'll wait until they're ready." Their eyes met over the horse's head, and the weight of understanding passed between them. He knew she wasn't just talking about the mare. "Would you like to learn to ride?" The question surprised them both. Caleb cleared his throat, Might be useful, living out here. I'd like that, Lily said, her smile bright and unexpected. The lessons began that afternoon. Caleb was a patient teacher, never raising his voice, never grabbing or pushing. He showed her how to approach the horses, how to read their moods, how to sit in the saddle without tensing up. Relax your shoulders, he instructed, one hand hovering near but not touching her back. The horse can feel your fear. Breathe deep. Let her know you trust her. It was advice that applied to more than riding. Gradually, Lily found herself relaxing in other ways too. She stopped flinching when Caleb entered a room, stopped automatically positioning herself near exits. One evening, as she practiced saddling the gentle bay mare, disaster struck. A rattlesnake, hidden in the straw, struck at the horse's leg. The mare reared, screaming, and Lily was thrown hard against the barn wall. Caleb was there in an instant, but his attention went first to the horse, checking the bite. Not deep, he muttered, then turned to Lily. Are you hurt? She struggled to sit up, wincing. Her shoulder throbbed where she'd hit the wall. I'm fine, just... Let me see. His hands were gentle but insistent as he checked for breaks, helped her to her feet. When she swayed, he steadied her with an arm around her waist. Easy now. Let's get you inside. She leaned on him without thinking, her usual wariness overridden by pain and shock. He half carried her to the house, settled her in the rocking chair, then went for his medical supplies. Shoulder's not broken, but it'll bruise fierce, he said, preparing a poultice. This'll help with the swelling. The remedy required removing her shirtwaist to apply properly. Lily hesitated, old fears rising. But this was Caleb, who'd never given her reason to fear, who was even now turning his back to give her privacy. I'll need help, she admitted quietly. I can't lift my arm properly. He turned back slowly, keeping his expression clinical, with careful hands. He helped her remove the garment, his touch impersonal as any doctor's. But when he saw the scars, old ones, faded but unmistakable across her shoulders and back, his hands stilled. Lily, just her name, weighted with sorrow and carefully controlled anger. My father believed in discipline, she said, voice barely a whisper. And Richard, he liked to leave marks where they wouldn't show. Caleb applied the poultice with infinite gentleness, his jaw tight with suppressed emotion. When he helped her back into a loose shirt, his hands shook slightly. I'm sorry, he said roughly. No one should have. You didn't deserve. He stopped, unable to finish. It's over now, she said, catching his hand in hers. I'm here now. Safe. He looked at their joined hands, her small fingers pale against his sun-darkened skin. Slowly, carefully, he squeezed back before releasing her. Yes, he said, you're safe. That night, Caleb built a new bedstead, higher off the ground, sturdier, with a better mattress he'd been saving. He installed a better lock on her door and added shutters to her window that could be barred from inside. When Lily protested the expense and trouble, he simply said, should have done it sooner. The next morning, she found him asleep in the rocking chair, having kept watch through the night to ensure she was all right after her fall. A quilt was tucked around him. She must have covered him in the pre-dawn hours, though she didn't remember doing it. She studied his face in the soft morning light. Asleep. The harsh lines softened, and she could see the younger man he'd been before grief carved its marks. His hand rested on his rifle, even in sleep ready to protect. When he woke, embarrassed to be caught sleeping, she simply handed him coffee and said, breakfast is ready when you are. Their routine resumed, but something fundamental had shifted. The careful distance they'd maintained was dissolving. Caleb began talking more at supper, sharing stories of his childhood in Texas, his journey north, the early days of building the ranch with Margaret. Lily reciprocated with carefully selected memories, her mother teaching her to sew, the books she'd loved as a child, the dreams she'd had before life turned harsh. She didn't speak of the darker times, and he didn't ask. but the shadows were acknowledged in the spaces between words. One evening, a summer thunderstorm rolled in, fierce and sudden. Lily was gathering laundry from the line when the sky opened. Within seconds, she was soaked through, struggling with sheets that whipped like sails in the wind. Caleb appeared through the rain, grabbing the other end of the sheet. Together they fought the wind, gathering the laundry in a sodden heap. Lightning split the sky, thunder following immediately, and Lily involuntarily cried out, "It's all right," Caleb shouted over the storm. "Just noise and light. Come on!" They ran for the house, Caleb's hand on her elbow, guiding her through the blinding rain. Inside, they stood dripping, the abandoned laundry in a heap between them. Lily began to shake, from cold, from memory, from the overwhelming intensity of the storm. Without thinking, Caleb pulled her against him, wrapping his arms around her trembling form. "You're safe," he murmured against her hair. "It's just weather. I've got you." She pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of rain and leather and safety. His heart beat steady and strong under her cheek. Slowly, her trembling eased. When she pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Water dripped from his hair onto her upturned face. For a moment, they stood frozen, the air between them charged with more than storm electricity. Caleb stepped back first, clearing his throat. You should get into dry clothes. You'll catch cold." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and fled to her room. Through the door, she heard him moving about, stoking the fire, setting water to heat. When she emerged in dry clothing, he'd changed too, and hot tea waited on the table. They sat in companionable silence, watching the storm rage outside. The fear that usually accompanied thunder had faded, replaced by something warm and unfamiliar. She was beginning to understand what safety truly meant, not just the absence of danger, but the presence of someone who would stand between her and the storm. "Caleb," she said softly, "thank you for everything." He looked up from his tea, and their eyes held for a long moment. "Lily," he said finally, his voice rough, "I need you to know something. When Duffy sent that letter, I was furious. I wasn't ready for anyone else in my life. But now—" He stopped, struggling with words. She waited, heart pounding. "Now I can't imagine this place without you in it." He finished simply, "You've brought something back to life here. Maybe in me too." Tears pricked her eyes. "You saved me," she whispered. "In every way a person can be saved." The storm was passing, thunder growing distant. In its wake came a profound quiet, broken only by the tick of the clock and the settle of logs in the fire. They sat together in that peaceful silence, two damaged souls finding healing in each other's presence. Neither spoke of love. It was too soon, too fragile for such words. But it was there in the space between them, growing as steady and sure as the prairie grass after rain. They had time, they had this place, they had each other. For now, it was more than enough. It was everything. The days grew shorter as autumn approached, bringing cooler nights and golden light that slanted across the prairie. The change in seasons seemed to mirror the shift between Caleb and Lily, a gradual warming despite the cooling air. One evening, Caleb returned from town with an unexpected purchase, a small mirror for Lily's room and a length of blue calico that matched her eyes. "Thought you might want to make something that isn't brown or gray," he said gruffly, not quite meeting her gaze. Lily fingered the soft fabric, emotion thick in her throat. It had been so long since anyone had noticed her preferences, longer still since she'd worn anything simply because it was pretty. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." He cleared his throat, already turning away. Just fabric, nothing special, but it was special, and they both knew it. That night, Lily worked by lamplight, cutting and stitching a new dress. Not fancy, but fitted properly, with small touches that made it hers. A bit of lace at the collar saved from an old garment. Buttons arranged just so. When she wore it the following Sunday, Caleb's reaction was worth all the pricked fingers. He stopped mid-motion while pulling on his boots, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. You look—" He paused, color rising in his weathered cheeks. "You look real nice, Lily." She smoothed the skirt, a genuine smile lighting her face. "It feels good to wear something that fits properly. Would you—" He stood, running a hand through his hair. "Would you like to take a ride? Show you the north pasture. It's pretty this time of year." They rode in comfortable silence, the horses picking their way along a trail that wound through yellowing grass. Caleb pointed out landmarks, a lightning-struck tree that marked the property line, a seasonal creek where deer came to drink, a hawk's nest high in a cottonwood, at the crest of a low hill. He reined in. The land spread before them in waves of gold and amber, the sky endless and blue. In the distance, mountains rose like purple dreams. "It's magnificent," Lily breathed. Margaret loved this spot. Caleb said quietly, "Used to say it looked like heaven's front porch." Lily glanced at him. "You talk about her more now." "Hurts less," he admitted. "Still miss her. Always will. But the pain's changed. Softer somehow." He looked at her. "You've helped with that." They dismounted, spreading a blanket in the shade of a lone tree. Lily had packed simple food: bread, cheese, apples from the tree behind the barn. They ate in companionable quiet, watching clouds drift across the endless sky. "I've been thinking," Caleb said suddenly, "about what you're owed. Not just wages, but proper recognition. You're not just a housekeeper. Lily, this place runs better with you here. You should have a say in things." "I don't need—" "Yes, you do." His voice was firm. "You need security, legal standing, protection." He paused, gathering courage. "I'm asking if you'd consider making this arrangement more permanent, a business partnership, if you will. Your name on the deed alongside mine. That way, if anything happens to me, you're protected." Lily stared at him, stunned. "Caleb, I couldn't— What would people say?" "Let them talk. They do anyway." He turned to face her fully. "You've earned this, Lily. Every day you've been here, you've made this place better, made me better. I want you to have the security you deserve." Tears slipped down her cheeks. No one had ever offered her autonomy, independence, legal rights to anything. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it." He reached out, thumb gently brushing away her tears. "No rush. Just think about it." That night, sleep eluded her. She lay staring at the ceiling, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his offer. Not marriage, he was careful not to pressure her that way, but something almost more precious: recognition of her worth, her contributions, her right to security. The next morning, she found him repairing the corral fence. "I've thought about it," she said without preamble, "and I have a counter-proposal." He straightened, giving her his full attention. "A trial partnership through winter. If we can manage the hard season together, then yes, but—" She took a deep breath. "I want to contribute more than housework. Teach me the business side. Let me help with the books, the planning. Make me a true partner." A slow smile spread across his face, rare and transformative. "Deal. We'll start tonight after supper." Their evening lessons became a new ritual. Caleb spread ledgers and maps across the table, explaining costs and profits, breeding plans and market prices. Lily proved quick with figures, often catching errors he'd missed. Her neat handwriting soon filled the margins with notes and calculations. One night, as they worked by lamplight, their hands accidentally touched, reaching for the same pencil. Instead of pulling away, they both stilled. Caleb turned his hand palm up, an invitation. Slowly, Lily placed her hand in his. "Lily," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered, but she didn't pull away. "I'm not good with words, never have been, but these past months, you've brought light back into this house, into my life." He squeezed her hand gently. "I don't want to scare you or push too fast, but I care for you, more than I expected to care for anyone again." "Caleb," she whispered, turning their joined hands over, studying the contrast, his large and work-hardened, hers smaller but no longer soft. I never thought I'd trust again, never thought I'd want. She paused, gathering courage. But with you, everything's different. You see me as a person, not property. That's a gift I can never repay. Not about repaying, he said roughly. It's about choosing. Every day, we choose to be here, together. That's what matters. She lifted their joined hands and, in a moment of unprecedented boldness, pressed a kiss to his scarred knuckles. He inhaled sharply, his other hand coming up to cup her face with infinite gentleness. "May I?" he asked. And she knew he wasn't just asking about a kiss. He was asking permission to change everything. "Yes," she breathed. The kiss was careful, almost reverent, a question and answer all at once. When they parted, both were trembling slightly. "Stay," she whispered, then blushed at her boldness. "Just sit with me a while?" They moved to the worn settee by the fire. Lily curled against his side, his arm around her shoulders. No words were needed. The fire crackled, the clock ticked, and two wounded hearts began to believe in the possibility of love again. Later, much later, Caleb pressed a kiss to her forehead and stood to leave. At her bedroom door, Lily caught his hand. "Caleb, what you're offering, the partnership, the security, I want you to know I'd stay anyway, even with nothing but what we have right now. This," she gestured between them, "is already more than I ever hoped for." His expression softened. "I know. That's why you deserve everything I can give." That night, Lily didn't bolt her door. The nightmares that had plagued her for months stayed away, replaced by dreams of golden fields and steady hands and a future she was finally brave enough to want. In the morning, she woke to find wildflowers on her windowsill and coffee already made. Caleb was at the table, working on correspondence, but he looked up when she entered, his smile warm and sure. "Morning," he said simply, but the word held promises. "Morning," she replied, and for the first time in her life, Lily truly meant it. The morning was good. The day was bright, and the future, uncertain as it might be, no longer held only fear. She moved to the stove, preparing breakfast as she had every morning for months. But now Caleb rose to help, their movements synchronized, comfortable. When their hands touched passing plates or cups, neither pulled away. This was partnership. This was choosing. This was the beginning of everything. Outside, the prairie wind sang through the grass, and the sun rose on a new day full of possibility. Inside the small house that had become a home, two people who had known too much sorrow discovered that joy, like the prairie grass, could grow again even after the harshest winter. The blue dress hung on a peg, catching the morning light. Later, Lily would wear it to town, her hand in Caleb's, heads high despite the whispers. But for now, there was breakfast to share, chores to complete side by side, and a life to build together. One choice at a time, one day at a time, one kiss at a time. It was more than enough. It was everything. The trouble started on a crisp October morning when Richard Hartwell arrived in Cedar Ridge. Lily was examining bolts of wool at the general store when she heard his voice, cultured, cold, and terrifyingly familiar. "I'm looking for a young woman, dark hair, green eyes, goes by the name Lily Jameson." Her blood turned to ice. Behind the fabric display, she pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing. "Mrs." Garrett's eager voice responded. "Oh, you mean Turner's woman? She lives out at his ranch, about 8 miles north." "Turner's woman?" Richard's tone sharpened. "She's his wife." "Well now, that's the question, isn't it?" "Mrs." Garrett lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Living out there bold as brass, the two of them, no proper ceremony that anyone's witnessed." Lily slipped out the back door, her purchases forgotten. She ran to where Caleb was loading supplies, grabbing his arm with shaking hands. "We need to leave, now!" One look at her face and he didn't ask questions. He helped her into the wagon and snapped the reins, urging the horses to a fast trot. Only when they were well out of town did he slow down. What happened? "Richard's here, the man my father—" She couldn't finish, terror closing her throat. Caleb's jaw tightened. "He has no claim on you. Lily, you're free." "You don't understand. My father signed papers. A contract. In Richard's eyes, I'm property he paid for." She pressed her hands to her face. "I should leave. I've brought danger to you." "You're not going anywhere." His voice was steel. "This is your home. We'll handle whatever comes." But Richard Hartwell wasn't a man easily discouraged. He arrived at the ranch the next day with 3 companions and a document that he waved like a weapon. "Miss Jameson is legally contracted to marry me," he announced, his pale eyes scanning Lily as she stood behind Caleb on the porch. "I've come to collect my property." "The lady says otherwise," Caleb replied evenly, though Lily could see the tension in his shoulders. "The lady doesn't have a say." Richard's smile was sharp as glass. "Her father took my money, signed a binding agreement. She can come willingly, or I'll have the law force her." "What law?" Caleb stepped forward. "This is Montana territory. We don't recognize ownership of free people." "Perhaps not, but theft is still a crime, isn't it? She stole from me when she fled, jewelry, money that was given in good faith as part of our engagement." Richard's smile widened. "I wonder what the good people of Cedar Ridge would think about harboring a thief." It was a lie, but Lily knew how easily lies became truth when spoken by wealthy men. She moved to step forward, but Caleb's hand caught hers, holding her back. "Get off my land," Caleb said quietly. "Don't come back." Richard laughed. "I'll be back with the sheriff, Turner, and a judge. We'll see how brave you are when you're facing charges for harboring a fugitive." After they left, Lily sank onto the porch steps, trembling. "He'll destroy you, your reputation, your business. I can't let that happen." Caleb knelt beside her, taking her shoulders gently. "Look at me. We're going to fight this. Together." The next days were tense. True to his word, Richard returned with Sheriff McKenna and Judge Hollowell, a man known for favoring whoever lined his pockets deepest. They set up an impromptu court in the town hall, summoning Lily to answer charges of theft and breach of contract. The hall was packed. Every gossip and busybody in the territory seemed to have gathered to witness the spectacle. Lily sat beside Caleb, wearing her best dress, the blue one he'd bought her hands folded to hide their shaking. Richard presented his case with smooth eloquence. He produced the contract her father had signed, detailed the money exchanged, painted a picture of an ungrateful woman who'd stolen from her benefactor. "Miss Jameson took advantage of my generosity." He concluded, "I demand the return of my property in compensation for my troubles." Judge Hollowell nodded sagely. "Miss Jameson, how do you answer these charges?" Lily stood on unsteady legs. "My father had no right to sell me like cattle. I took nothing that wasn't mine, the clothes on my back and coach fare I earned serving in the boarding house. Nevertheless," the judge said, "a legal contract exists, unless you can prove coercion or provide witnesses to support your claims. I'll witness." The voice came from the back of the hall. Mrs. Morrison. The elderly woman from the train made her way forward, leaning heavily on her cane. "I met Miss Jameson on her journey west," she said clearly. "She was terrified, covered in bruises, begged me not to let anyone know where she was heading. That's not the behavior of a thief. That's a woman running for her life." A murmur ran through the crowd. Richard's face darkened. "The ravings of a confused old woman, I'll witness too." This time it was Doc Hanson, rising from his seat. "I've tended Miss Jameson's injuries, seen scars that no woman should bear. If she fled this man, she had good reason." One by one, others stood. The minister's wife who'd noticed Lily's fear in church, the blacksmith who'd seen her flinch from raised voices. Even Mrs. Garrett, shamefaced, admitted she'd noticed the bruises Lily tried to hide, but it was Caleb who delivered the final blow. He stood, pulling a telegram from his pocket. "I hired a lawyer in Billings to investigate Mr. Hartwell's claims. Turns out he's wanted in Maryland for assault on another young woman. And that contract, he handed the telegram to the judge, was signed after Mr. Jameson lost a rigged card game. Extortion, not legitimate debt. The hall erupted. Richard lunged for Lily, but Caleb was faster, his fist connecting with Richard's jaw in a satisfying crack. The sheriff finally moved to action, restrained Richard as he spat threats. Judge Hollowell, seeing which way the wind blew, banged his gavel. Case dismissed. Mr. Hartwell, you'll leave this town immediately, or face charges yourself. As the crowd dispersed, Lily stood stunned. The town that had whispered about her, judged her, had ultimately protected her. Caleb's arm came around her shoulders, solid and warm. It's over, he murmured. You're free. But the damage to Caleb's reputation was real. Several ranchers who'd promised to buy his cattle backed out. The bank suddenly questioned his loan payments. Morrison spread rumors that Caleb was a violent man who'd attacked an innocent visitor. Watching him lose business because of her was more painful than any bruise Richard had given her. One evening, as Caleb went over the ledgers with deepening worry lines, Lily made a decision. We should marry, she said quietly. He looked up, startled. Lily! Not for appearances, not because of the town. She moved to sit beside him, taking his hands. Because I love you. Because you've shown me what a true partnership looks like. Because I want to face whatever comes as your wife, not just your house guest. His hands tightened on hers. Are you sure? After everything you've been through, I don't want you to feel obligated. She silenced him with a kiss. Soft but certain. I'm sure, if you'll have me. If I'll... He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. Lily, I've been yours since the day you stood up to that mare in the barn. I just didn't want to push, didn't want you to think... I know. She pulled back to look at him, smiling through tears. You gave me time to choose. Now I'm choosing you. They married the following week in the little church, with Doc Hanson and Mrs. Morrison as witnesses. Lily wore the blue dress, wildflowers in her hair. Caleb's hands shook as he slipped a simple gold band on her finger, Margaret's ring, which Mrs. Morrison had quietly returned to him, saying Margaret would have wanted it so. The ceremony was simple, the reception merely cake and coffee in the church hall. But when Caleb kissed his bride, the whole room seemed to hold its breath at the tenderness of it. That night, in the privacy of their home, truly their home now, they came together as husband and wife. There was nervousness at first, old fears surfacing, but Caleb was patient, gentle, constantly murmuring reassurances and asking permission. When Lily finally relaxed in his arms, trusting him completely, it was a victory greater than any court case. Later, as they lay entwined, Lily traced the scars on his hands. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both carrying marks from the past. But building something new, he replied, kissing her forehead. Something good. The challenges weren't over. The ranch struggled through the winter. Some townspeople remained cold, and nightmares sometimes visited them both. But they faced it all together, choosing each other again each morning, building a life on the foundation of mutual respect and hard-won trust. The woman who'd stepped off the train with only fear and a carpet bag had found more than safety. She'd found a partner, a purpose, and a love that was all the stronger for being chosen freely. And the man who'd thought his heart was buried with his first wife discovered it could beat again, stronger than before. In the end, Richard Hartwell had been wrong about one thing. Lily had never been anyone's property. She was her own woman, who'd chosen her own man. And together they were writing their own story on the wide Montana sky. Winter descended on Montana with a vengeance that year. The first blizzard struck in early November, 3 weeks earlier than usual, catching everyone unprepared. Caleb had been working frantically to move the cattle to sheltered pastures, but the storm's fury outpaced his efforts. The wind howled like a living thing, driving snow horizontal across the prairie. Ice formed on everything. The windows, the door latches. Even inside where the walls met the roof, the temperature plummeted so low that water froze between the well and the house. For 3 days, they were trapped inside while the storm raged. Caleb paced like a caged animal, worried about the cattle, about their dwindling wood supply, about a dozen things he couldn't control. Lily worked to keep his spirits up, but she could see the weight of responsibility crushing him. When the storm finally broke, they ventured out to find devastation. The barn roof had partially collapsed under the snow's weight. Worse, they found a dozen cattle frozen where they'd been caught in the open, including 2 pregnant heifers Caleb had been counting on for spring. "We won't make it through winter," he said flatly, staring at the losses. "Not with the bank already breathing down our necks." Lily took his arm. "We'll find a way. We always do." But privately, she was frightened. They'd already stretched every dollar, and with the business lost after Richard's visit, their reserves were gone. She'd sold her mother's locket, the one thing of value she'd hidden when she fled, but that money had gone to repair the barn. The next weeks were a constant battle against the elements. They rationed everything: food, firewood, kerosene for the lamps. Lily learned to make meals from almost nothing, stretching their meager supplies with creativity born of desperation. Caleb worked from dawn to dusk, trying to keep the remaining cattle alive. Then came the night when everything nearly ended. Another blizzard struck, worse than the first. The wind tore at the house like it meant to pluck it from the earth. Around midnight, they heard a terrible crack, the main support beam in the barn giving way. "The horses!" Caleb shouted over the wind, already reaching for his coat. "You can't go out in this." Lily grabbed his arm. "You'll never find the barn, let alone make it back." "I have to try. If we lose the horses too, if you die out there, none of it matters." She was crying now, holding him with all her strength. "Please, Caleb, please don't leave me." He stopped struggling, looking down at her tear-stained face. Slowly, he pulled her into his arms. All right, love, I'll stay." They huddled together through the night, listening to the barn's death throes, knowing their lifeline was being destroyed. When morning came, pale and bitter cold, they found the barn completely collapsed. Miraculously, the horses had sensed danger and broken out of their stalls, taking shelter in the lee of the house, but the hay, the feed, the tools, all buried under tons of snow and broken timber. That's when Lily began to cough. At first, it was just a tickle in her throat, but as days passed and the cold deepened, the cough worsened. Soon she was burning with fever, struggling for each breath. Caleb wrapped her in every blanket they owned, kept the fire roaring despite their dwindling wood supply. But nothing helped. "I need to get Doc Hansen," he said, but they both knew the truth. Town was impossible to reach with the roads buried under 6-foot drifts. "Don't leave me," she whispered between labored breaths. "If I'm going to, I want you here." "You're not going anywhere," he said fiercely. But she could see the fear in his eyes. For 3 days and nights, Caleb never left her side. He spooned broth between her cracked lips, bathed her burning skin with snow-cooled cloths, held her through the delirium. When she cried out for her mother, he smoothed her hair and murmured comfort. When she thrashed in fever dreams of Richard, he held her gently and reminded her she was safe. On the 3rd night, her fever broke. She opened clear eyes to find Caleb slumped in the chair beside the bed, his hand clasping hers even in exhausted sleep. He looked haggard, days of stubble on his jaw, dark circles under his eyes. "Caleb," she whispered. He jerked awake instantly. "Lily, how do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by horses," she managed, "but alive." He pressed her hand to his lips, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I thought I was going to lose you, just like—" He couldn't finish. "But you didn't," she said softly. "I'm still here. We're still here." Recovery was slow. Lily could barely stand at first, weak as a newborn calf. But gradually, with Caleb's patient care, she regained strength. They survived on melted snow for water, the last of their preserved vegetables, and the tough meat from a cow that had died in the storm. One morning, as Lily sat wrapped in quilts by the fire, Caleb stood staring out at the white wasteland that had been their ranch. "I've failed you," he said quietly. "Promised you security, partnership, a future, and look what I've brought you to, starving in a frozen shack, nearly dying of cold." Lily rose unsteadily and went to him, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. "You've given me everything that matters. A home, love, the freedom to choose my own life. Some life," he said bitterly. "You could have married someone prosperous, lived in comfort." "Stop!" She moved to face him, hands on his cheeks. "I could have married Richard and lived in a pretty prison. Instead, I chose you. I choose you still. Every hardship we face together is better than any comfort I'd have alone." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "How did I get so lucky?" "Not luck," she murmured. "Choice, always choice." As if in answer to their determination, the weather finally broke. A warm Chinook wind swept down from the mountains, melting snow with almost magical speed. Within days, patches of brown earth appeared, and the surviving cattle lowed with relief. Their neighbors, the Hendersons, arrived with a wagon of supplies. "Heard you folks had a rough time." "Mister," Henderson said gruffly. "Wife insisted we check on you." It was the beginning of a tide turn. Other ranchers came by with offers of hay, tools to help clear the barn wreckage, even a few head of cattle to help rebuild the herd. The banker, perhaps touched by the community support, extended their loan terms. "Why?" Lily asked Mrs. Henderson as they sorted through donated preserves. "After all the gossip, the scandal." The older woman patted her hand. "Folks respect grit. Dear, you and Caleb showed more backbone this winter than most show in a lifetime. Besides," she smiled, "we've all needed help sometime. That's what neighbors do." Spring came slowly, hesitantly, as if afraid winter might change its mind. But come it did, bringing green shoots through the snow, calves dropping in the pastures, and hope returning like sap to winter-bare trees. On the first truly warm day, Caleb and Lily stood surveying their domain. The barn was gone, but plans for a new one were drawn. The herd was smaller but healthy. The house still stood, battered but solid. "We made it," Caleb said, wonder in his voice. "Together," Lily added, threading her fingers through his. He looked down at her, this woman who'd arrived scared and bruised, who'd become his partner in every sense. She was thinner after their winter trials, but her eyes held a strength forged in hardship. "Lily," he said suddenly, "that first day, when you stepped off the train, did you think we'd end up here?" She smiled, the expression transforming her face. "I thought I was running to nowhere. Instead, I ran home. Even after this winter, the hunger, the cold, nearly dying, especially after this winter," she said firmly. "We survived the worst together. Whatever comes next, we can handle." He kissed her then. There in the spring sunshine, with their broken ranch around them and their whole future ahead, it was a kiss of promise, of partnership, of love tested by fire and ice and found true. In her arms, Caleb felt the last of his old grief finally ease. Margaret would have liked Lily, would have wanted this for him, and Lily, feeling a solid warmth, knew that every scar on her heart and body had been worth it to lead her here. They'd lost much that winter, cattle, buildings, nearly each other, but they'd gained something precious, the absolute certainty that their love could weather any storm. In the end, that was worth more than any profitable ranch or social acceptance. Spring was here. They were together, and that was everything. Spring transformed the Montana landscape with an artist's touch, where snow had lain thick as despair. Now wildflowers pushed through, purple lupines, golden buttercups, and the delicate prairie roses that Lily had come to love. The surviving cattle grew fat on new grass, and the sound of construction rang across the ranch as neighbors helped raise the new barn. It was during this season of renewal that Lily first suspected. The morning sickness came gently at first, easy to attribute to the hard winter's aftermath. But when it persisted, when she found herself dizzy at the smell of coffee and craving strange combinations of food. She knew. She told Caleb on a Sunday morning as they sat on the porch, watching the sun paint the grasslands gold. He was planning the day's work when she placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "I think we're going to need to add another room to the house," she said softly. He froze, his eyes searching hers. "Lily, are you saying—" "Come, Autumn. There'll be 3 of us." The work-hardened rancher, who'd faced down blizzards and bankruptcy, stared at her with wonder and terror in equal measure. "A baby. Our baby," she confirmed, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Are you happy?" He pulled her into his arms so tightly she squeaked. "Happy? Lily, I'm—" He pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. "I'm terrified. After Margaret. What if— No what ifs," she said firmly. "We've survived everything else. We'll survive this too. Together." The months that followed were filled with quiet joy and careful preparation. Caleb became almost comically protective, trying to prevent Lily from lifting anything heavier than a coffee pot. She laughed at his efforts, but was touched by the care behind them. The community that had once whispered about them now embraced them fully. Mrs. Henderson organized a quilting bee, where the women of Cedar Ridge gathered to make baby blankets and share advice. Even Mrs. Garrett, who'd been so cruel that first day, brought a beautifully smocked baby gown. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly to Lily. "I judged too quick and harsh. You've proved yourself a true frontier woman." Doc Hansen made regular visits, teaching Caleb what to watch for, what to do if the baby came early. The old doctor's presence reassured them both, especially when he said, "You're strong as any woman I've tended. Mrs. Turner, that baby's got a fighter for a mother." As summer ripened toward autumn, Lily grew heavy with child. She continued working, though Caleb insisted on help. They hired the widow Morgan's eldest girl, Sarah, who proved eager to learn ranch work alongside household duties. One evening, as Lily sat mending by lamplight, she felt the baby move strongly. "Caleb, come here." He knelt beside her chair as she guided his hand to the spot. The baby kicked again, and his face transformed with wonder. "Strong little thing," he murmured. "Like the father," Lily said, then gasped as another movement followed. "Oh, I think this one's going to be a rider, already practicing." They'd chosen names, Margaret for a girl, to honor Caleb's first wife, and James for a boy, after Lily's grandfather, the only man in her childhood who'd shown her kindness. The first pains came with the first frost, earlier than expected. Caleb rode hard for Doc Hansen while Sarah stayed with Lily. By the time the men returned, Lily was deep in labor's grip. "You're doing fine," Doc Hansen assured her, though Caleb looked pale as winter snow. "Baby's just eager to meet you." The hours that followed tested them both. Lily gripped Caleb's hand through each wave of pain, drawing strength from his presence. He never left her side, whispering encouragement, cooling her face with damp cloths, being the anchor she needed. As dawn broke over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, a new voice joined the world. Lusty, strong, announcing arrival with impressive volume. "A son," Doc Hansen announced, placing the squalling bundle in Lily's arms. "Healthy as they come." Caleb stared at the tiny face, the perfect fingers that gripped his own with surprising strength. "He's beautiful," he whispered. "Lily, he's perfect. James Caleb Turner," Lily said softly, tracing the baby's cheek. "Our miracle." In the days that followed, their small house filled with a new kind of joy. Caleb proved a devoted father, walking the floors at night when James fussed, changing diapers with the same careful precision he used for ranch work. Lily watched him cradle their son, singing the same lullabies he'd once sung to comfort her, and her heart felt too full for her chest. 2 weeks after James's birth, a letter arrived that made Lily's hands shake. She recognized the handwriting. Mrs. Morrison from the train, who'd stood up for her at the trial. "My dear girl," the letter read, "I hope this finds you well and happy. I've followed your story through mutual acquaintances and am delighted to hear of your marriage and new arrival. I'm writing because I believe you should know. Your father passed last month. The drink finally claimed him. But before he died, he asked me to find you, to tell you he was sorry. He left what little he had to you, not much, but perhaps enough to help with the baby. More importantly, he wanted you to know that he recognized his wrongs. I hope this brings you some peace. Your friend, Ellen Morrison. Lily wept then, for the father she'd never truly had, for the apology that came too late, for the little girl she'd been who deserved so much better. Caleb held her as she cried. James, peaceful between them. It's strange, she said finally. I thought I'd feel nothing, but there's sadness still. That's because you have a good heart. Caleb said, despite everything, you can still feel compassion. Our son's lucky to have such a mother. The money from her father's estate, though modest, allowed them to pay off the last of their debts. With the ranch finally on solid footing, they could look to the future with hope rather than fear. On a glorious October day, they held a harvest celebration. The new barn stood proud against the sky, filled with hay for winter. The house had been expanded, with a proper nursery for James and even a small parlor. Neighbors gathered to share food and stories, to admire the baby and celebrate survival. As evening fell, Lily stood on the porch where she'd first seen this place that had become her salvation, in her arms. James cooed at the sunset. Beside her, Caleb wrapped an arm around her waist, solid and sure. Do you remember? She said softly. That first day, you didn't even want to bring me here. Best mistake I ever made, he admitted. Duffy's meddling brought me everything I never knew I needed. Old Duffy himself sat in a rocking chair nearby, James's tiny fist wrapped around his gnarled finger. Always knew you two belonged together, he said smugly. Just needed a push. A push? Caleb laughed. You threw us off a cliff. Oh man, and look how well you learned to fly, Duffy retorted. As stars began to appear in the vast Montana sky, Lily reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from a frightened woman fleeing abuse to a beloved wife and mother, from a stranger stepping off a train to the heart of a community. Every step had led to this moment. Thank you, she whispered to Caleb, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for giving me the chance to choose. He kissed her temple. Thank you for choosing us, for being brave enough to stay. Inside, friends laughed and music played. Outside, the prairie wind carried the scent of wood smoke and autumn leaves. And in her arms, their son, born of love freely given and received, gazed up at the stars with eyes full of wonder. The woman who'd arrived hidden behind a veil now stood revealed in all her strength. The man who'd thought his heart buried had found it beating stronger than ever. Together, they'd built something neither could have imagined. A family, a future, a love that had weathered every storm. The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had witnessed all their struggles and triumphs. Below them, the small house on the prairie glowed with warmth and light, a beacon of hope in the vast darkness. Inside that light, two souls who'd found each other against all odds held their miracle close and knew that they were finally, truly home. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, and another answered. The sound drifted across the grasslands, wild and free, a song of survival and belonging that echoed the truth written in their hearts. Love was not something to be bought or sold, commanded or stolen. Love was a choice, made fresh each morning, stronger for every trial overcome. And as the moon rose over the Montana prairie, silvering the grass where wildflowers would bloom again come spring, Caleb and Lily Turner chose each other once more, their love as endless as the sky above and as enduring as the earth below. Thank you for listening to this tale from the Wild West. If you've enjoyed Caleb and Lily's journey, we'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please subscribe to Wild West Campfire and share your thoughts about their story in the comments below. Did their love touch your heart? What was your favorite moment? Let's gather round our virtual campfire and share what this story meant to you.